going to have a little eulogy by a couple of Paul's good friends here. Father Frank. Father. Seat back, gentlemen.
Everyone you meet in life is unique. Paul G. Ludwig, or Lud, was just one. He happened to be more unique than most. He fit no stereotypes, nor any cookie-cutter categories, that's for sure. In boat building terminology, Lud was a custom one-off. He truly was one of a kind. Of course, he was also a 400-year-old wizard. Many times I would hear Lud announce to a newcomer that he was, in fact, that 400-year-old wizard. Whenever I heard him say that, I always hung around the conversation because invariably the confused individual would turn to me and ask if it were true. I would simply nod my head yes.
That was just normal for Lud. It may have been in response to a strict upbringing in his formative years, or from the stories he heard from his Aunt Dottie about the rum runners and speakeasies of Newport in the Golden Age. Whatever the source, the result was Lud. Often unusual, occasionally profound, always entertaining, and seldom politically correct. As any 400-year-old wizard should be, but just normal for Lud. You may not realize it, but Lud was quite an athlete in his younger days. I'm not talking about being the star quarterback of the football team, but he was strong and agile. You could often find him dangling on the end of a wire, hanging on Donzo's 505 trapeze, or carving down some icy expert ski slope, or hanging out at the top spreader after free climbing a mast, a skill he would repeat on occasion in a full gorilla suit. But that was just Lud. He possessed many talents. He could fly a blooper. If any of you have ever tried, it's a little different. Any sail you trim by easing the halyard, well, you get the picture. Lud was a natural at it. He was one of the founders of the Mudheads. He was the original Vice Commodore, a post he held for many years, and thank goodness he was. And it's only fitting that we're kind of in the birthplace of the Mudheads right here on West Mystic. This is where the Mudheads were formed, between Timleys and here and out there. That's where the mud came from. Yeah. But thank goodness he held that Vice Commodore's post, because for several years the club experienced what people would refer to as the Dark Ages, and Lud was the only one who kept it on its yellow feet. And for that, we will be forever grateful.
Hear, hear. Years ago, while motoring Fujimo through the Erie Barge Canal at dusk, Lud noticed a neon Budweiser sign glowing from the nearby shore. He convinced Donzo of the necessity to tie up at the local marina and go communicate with the natives, as it was the only proper thing to do. So after a quick shower, he led a crew of 4 down the unlit dirt road, found the tavern. They sauntered up the stairs, pushed open the door, and walked inside, only to find a family of 4 sitting at the kitchen table eating dinner. The neon sign that Lud had spotted was hanging from the teenage son's bedroom window. He never missed a beat. As the enraged father was chasing them out of his home, Lud had the wherewithal to inquire the whereabouts of the real bar in town.
Most of you probably know that Lud loved to talk. If you sat on the right bar stool, you could be on the receiving end of a Lud conversation. In fact, in the 40 years I knew him, I think I was on the receiving end of every conversation I had with him. On the boat, Henry called this the upper lip thermal, guaranteed to bring wind on a calm day. When he ran out of people to talk to in Noank, he resorted to technology to expand his horizons. Not necessarily new technology. I'm talking about his ham radio. Picture big antennas, really tall. Tubes glowing softly, dialing in just the right frequency so he could talk to Kansas City or Quebec. It required skill and not a small amount of tinkering. He loved the tinkering part. He was good at it. In fact, if there was one thing Lud excelled at, it was tinkering. I think he got that skill from working on his cars. He had a car habit. Well, he had lots of habits, but I'll talk about his car habit. There was a time when he had a thing for old British sports cars, or old British cars in general. It started with an Austin Healey Sprite, and continued on to an Austin American, but affectionately known as Hooey and Dewey. And these were cars that required constant attention and no small level of magic to outsmart their dysfunctional electrical and mechanical systems. Lud was a master at it. It was a good distraction for him. And later, when he finally rid himself of the British car bug and went 100% German, he took his tinkering to new heights.
Yes, to a higher level he did. It started with my son Pat's idle curiosity for cheap Estes rockets firing from the top of Fort Hill. One day Lud came along for the ride. Here was the ideal playground for his eccentric, mechanical, and very smart mind. He took it to new heights. I'm not talking about the little rockets you buy at Walmart. This turned into big toys for big boys. A 6-foot tall, 6-inch diameter, finely crafted nose cones and fins, altimeters and radio tracking devices. All NASA-like. He set up a machine shop in the basement and aimed for the sky, special permits and all. He had to actually call the Groton Airport on occasion to let him know that he was firing the rocket from the top of Fort Hill and to make sure the flight pattern was clear. I am not making that up. Lud was the rocket scientist. But for Lud, that was just normal, everyday occurrence.
So Lud had begun to settle down a bit lately. His passion had returned to his boats, and the unmatched enjoyment that is offered by the wind and the sea. It was Captain Lud on the good sloop Whitecap, with everything perfectly varnished, neatly stowed, and seaworthy. Fancy Turk's head knot on the tiller. He was good with knots. He had an outboard motor, but I can't remember a time when he used it. He would plan his voyages better than that, knowing the winds, timing the currents, and bringing adequate beverages assured him of easily sailing back to the mooring. He learned some of these skills in his younger days as the first mate on Barlavento, Pierre DuPont's 72-foot ketch that sailed out of West Harbor and Fisher's Island. It was on the Barlavento one fall, on the delivery to Florida, that Lud met up with his brother Dave in Beaufort, North Carolina. Dave was stationed at Fort Bragg at the time, right down the road, and drove over to meet Paul and spend the night on the boat. But with the Mudhead Burgee flying aloft, they sipped their gin and tonics, sitting on their deck chairs topside, while tied up right along the sidewalk in downtown Beaufort. It's a beautiful spot. And Paul took great delight in telling Dave, in a loud voice, for all the tourists to hear, how he really needed a bigger boat next year because the Barlavento was cramping his style.
To me, the heart and soul of Paul Ludwig was displayed on the day when I raced my A-boat in a long-distance race around Fisher's Island. I called him early that Sunday morning and asked him if he wanted to go. As always, without hesitation, he said yes. We stopped by the Universal store, we grabbed a case of beer out of the back door and a couple of grinders and started the race. It was a beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky, gentle easterly breeze. The course took us from GLP through Weekapiset, where we somehow managed to put a 2-mile lead on the second place boat. I'm not kidding. Halfway down the backside of Fisher's, with the spinnaker flying, the tiller unloaded, and as I looked over the side of the boat, I saw the rudder sinking to the bottom. Somewhat freaked out, I shouted to Lud. He simply said, "Murphy, we're sailing downwind, we're going down current. The only thing we have to do is jibe around race point and line up the finish line. which was 5 miles away. He said, "Murphy, the important question is, how many beers do we have left?" So I looked into my cooler, which was a green hefty bag filled with ice, and counted 10 beers. I said, "Lud, we have 10 beers." He said, "Plenty." So we jogged, lined up on the finish line, got the gun, and managed to get the sails down before we hit the rocks. We then asked the committee boat for a tow because the second place boat was still very far away. To me, it wasn't the winning the race that stands out. It was more that I truly enjoyed sitting with Paul on the boat, making the sails our rudder, having a few beers, and just talking about life. That part I will never forget.
And I'd like to bring your attention to the colors. And stand back, please.
It's going to be loud.
Get away, Jimmy.
Oh, it's a slow fuse.
Lud made this cannon.
Captain Paul Ludwig.
That's right.
There it was.
Put it out, Lud.
Truly.